So to start with, we'll talk about the report filters and filtering in a business activity query, a BAQ. Of course, to get a filter in a BAQ, you first need to create a business activity query that contains data with one or more fields that you can use as a filter. Most often, the fields that are available to use as a filter are what they call key fields, the main fields that you use to link between tables, or fields that you move to the BAQ search. I found that sometimes those are available and sometimes not, but you can move them there and see if they're available in your BAQ report when you set up your BAQ report. Here you can see my example has 4 different fields that I can filter on, down on the bottom here. However, I just chose to filter by the customer ID. So here are the results if we do a BAQ report and use the filters. To see your results after you lay out your report in SSRS Report Builder or in Visual Studio, you can run the report from within the BAQ Report Designer from the Overflow menu, or add the report to a menu item. Then the report print window opens where you can use the search to search for customers, and then they'll show in your filter as chips. That's what they call them. You can select as many customers as you want to show on your report. So here again, I selected only 4 customers, and you can see the report only shows those 4 customers. So the BAQ filter worked. Another option for filters with reports is filtering in the SSRS report itself. Usually it's better to filter your data before it gets to your SSRS report. However, there may be some instances when you need to filter the report after it gets to your SSRS report. You can filter your table, your group, and probably other places as well. Here's an example of adding a filter on a standard report definition or RDD report where the filter is on the table within the SSRS report. The filter shows labor hours that are greater than 100. And now we can see the results of using that filter. So the example shown on the left shows the report before the filter, so there are labor hours that are under 100 hours. And then after the filter is applied, the example on the right shows the same report with the filter on, and all the labor hours are greater than 100 hours for this particular date range and employees. Next, we'll talk about report parameters in SSRS. You can set up different kinds of parameters. The first example here is a simple parameter. Cody Bear likes things simple, so he's happy there. To start out, this example shows a query that uses a single simple parameter in the query that acts as a filter. We added a little extra to the filter by using the like option for the parameter, using the single quote %, single quote plus your parameter, and then ending with the single quote % and single quote makes your field like when you also put in the word like in your query. So you will see in the example, you only need to enter a portion of the part to have any parts that contain that portion be selected in the report, because this is based on the part table and we're putting a parameter in for the part number. So here are results for a simple parameter. We put in the like for DCD and we get all the part numbers that start with DCD. If there were other parts that actually had DCD in the middle of the part number, those would also be shown in the report. Next is an example of a simple parameter using a query. Instead of entering a value for your parameter, you can create a query that gives you the values to select from. Notice on the left, we set up a parameter for the product code, also known as the product group in part maintenance. They call it product code in the fields, but product group in the screen. To pull values from a query, you can create a data set that contains a query of all the values that you want to pull. So you can see down here, we have the query, and then you can also create your main data set, which will have some of your report data and has a where clause that includes your references to the product code parameter. The main part in the parameter is that you say that you get the values from a query and you pick the data set, which is the name of this data set, and you tell it which field you want to see and what to label the field. So here are the results of that query using a simple parameter. The upper right shows the selections you can choose from your product code / product group. After I chose the CONF product group, the report displays all the parts that are assigned to that product group. So you can see it was selected here, and this is the results and all the different part numbers that are in that product group. Cascading parameters is the more complex. We can look at a report example that uses these. First, we define the sales rep parameters. And again, we get those values from a query, and we're selecting distinct so that you don't get multiple parameters or multiple sales rep codes from your customer table. Because you want the list, you don't want the list to have duplicates in it. And then the territory parameter is set up again, pulling the values from query. And you can see the query on the bottom here. And notice the where clause includes the sales rep parameter. So that's how you link the two different parameters to have cascading parameters. Again, notice that we have distinct territory IDs, so we don't get duplicates in the parameter list. So now we can see the results of our cascading parameters. The picture on the right again shows the cascading parameters. Here you can see you choose a sales rep and there's no duplicates, and you cannot choose the territory until after you choose your sales rep because it's cascading based on that sales rep. And then I showed a couple different examples after I chose the sales rep lane. These are the territories that are available for that sales rep, and the sales rep Tyler. And these are the territories that are available for Tyler's sales rep. The report example shows the selection of lane as the sales rep, and 3 out of the 4 territories, that's Penny Lane, that she has. Notice the US mid territory is not selected because we don't see any results with US mid territory. Okay, next on to report automation. The first example that we have is using a data directive. One way to automate printing, previewing, or emailing a report is that you can use the data directive. Here I created a standard data directive on the ship head table. I have one condition here, and the condition is that the ship head ready to invoice field of the updated row is equal to the true expression. So the ready to invoice field is actually, again, different on the screen. That's the shipped field. If you check the shipped box, that's the ready to invoice field. And then I have an auto print widget pictures in the middle, and to the right show the hyperlinks used by the auto print widget. First, you're going to define where to find your report at the top here. Most often you'll just use these 2 bottom drop downs, but you could also use these selections in your trying to find your report. And often you'll have it saying that the report is used by the query or it's the primary table. Sometimes you would think it's going to be ship head is the primary table, but your report style doesn't show in there, then choose ship head is used by the report instead. Next, set up your report printing or previewing options. Here you can see those setups, and I set mine up to auto preview, but if you chose printing, then you would have more available down here to set up if you wanted to. You can set up a specific printer. You can set up the number of copies. It shows down here. Also might want to fill in the user description. If you fill that in, that will be shown in System Monitor when it's automatically happening. You could know that it's coming from the data directive for ship head, for example. Finally, you fill in the report parameters on the right-hand side. This is the last thing to fill in for the auto print section here. Frequently, you'll only need the first one or a few parameters at the top of the report parameters, and the rest you can accept the default, but you'd have to test or know, for example, what parameters are required for each report. And then possibly you want to change the SSRS routing to be false so that your data directive and your routing do not clash from what you're trying to do and what the routing is trying to do. Next, your results for automating with the data directive. What you have to do is test your data directive by opening customer shipment entry and marking a shipment as shipped, as we mentioned, and then click save, and your report should then print or preview depending on what you set up. And there actually is an email option in there too in the data directive. Then view your report results as shown on the right. So we can see this was pack 401, we marked it shipped, and then it automatically previewed on the right. The next type of report automation we're going to talk about is using advanced print and routing. So if you have the license for advanced print and routing, you can add an SSRS breaking and routing option to your SSRS reports. The option may not be available in Kinetic. So far, I haven't seen it available in Kinetic, but will be available in the report style if you use the classic menu item for report styles, as long as you have the license. When you add a breaking and routing rule, first you're going to establish which table you're going to break on. So this is a customer statement, and we're going to break on the customer table, and then how it would be broken out for your printing, previewing, emailing, etc. You can pick which column it should break on or a combination of columns to put over here to break on. And then usually you'll set up a condition, although you don't have to. Here I set up that the customer contact email address contains the @ sign. So if it doesn't contain an @ sign, they don't have an email address. So we have, it's set up to email after this condition if this condition is true. And then We can see the actual email here set up if the condition is true and where it gets sent from and to. And then it uses both static data and links to data fields in Epicor. So you can insert fields that are available in your report to put into your email when you send it. And if the condition is false, we put on here the user action, and that doesn't have anything to set up. That means if it's false, it will do whatever selection you chose when you go to print your report in the print options, whether you chose to print or preview or email based on what you say there. Of course, you can't really email if it doesn't have the @ sign. So you could also generate it, I guess, too. And so here are the results. To finish the automation, you still need to open your printing options for customer statements. So here's the customer statements, and I chose our report style that has advanced printing and routing, APR, and you can see it automatically shows the routing checkbox checked because it knows there's a routing associated with this report style. If for any reason you wanted to skip that, you could uncheck it and just print or print preview. Once you chose whatever date range and etc., and then you make sure to pick your report style, then notice the output format is PDF, and finally click the preview option in my case, or print, or one of the options from the overflow menu to send out or print or preview the statements. It does not matter which option is chosen, the routing will override what you chose unless in this case there is no @ symbol in the contact email, and then it goes to the user action that we set up in the routing rule. My example shows 2 customers had previewed statements since they didn't have an @ symbol in the contact email address. That's these 2 at the top here. And then my third one did have an email. I put my own email in there, and it sent an email to myself and listed the things that we had set up in the email for the body and the customer and the name of the attachment. So the last option that we have for report automation, what's the last one that I'm demonstrating today? There are other options, but automating using SSRS subscriptions. So I'm no expert at SSRS subscriptions, so if you need further help on this topic, I may need to refer you to another code of error. However, researching about the subject, I found that one of the keys is that you need to set up the data source with credentials that are specific credentials, or possibly using a server's account. In the SSRS web browser URL for the report, you should be able to click on the ellipse, the 3 dots, ellipsis for your report, choose the manage option, and then under the manage option, you can see there's subscriptions where you can add a new subscription or edit an existing subscription if you have the security set up to be able to do that in your URL for SSRS reports. The picture on the right shows some of the options that you can set up for your subscriptions. Mine only has the option for Windows file share and as the destination, but you may have other options available to you as the drop-down seems to indicate. And then the results of using the SSRS subscription, here we can see I set it up to run for a few days. I only showed first 2 here, and you can see that the reports are there in the shared file location. And this is what the report looks like. Keep in mind the reports you choose for subscriptions may need to be reports without parameters or with parameters saved in the reports, for example, maybe a date calculation as a formula based on today's date plus X number of days. I also read online that you could create separate standard subscriptions, each configured with its own set of parameter values. I see there is a parameters area under the manage option for your report. Since mine doesn't use parameters, I did not set that up.